Welcome to Gin and All Sorts. This is your host, Mike Gill. Hope you all had a wonderful weekend last week and got a chance to listen to my first episode, which was history. Yeah, it's quite an interesting weekend. We actually watched Red Notice, with our Canadian zany Ryan Reynolds alongside The Rock. It was quite fun, actually, and there was a scene in there where they were both drinking gin, and I recognized the bottle straight away. It was Aviation. Only this time, they didn't actually show the label. So I wonder if that was Mr. Reynolds' sense of humor, because we know he's involved, and they actually, the company that's now owns Aviation has millions upon millions of dollars for advertising, but they didn't actually show it, and Ryan Reynolds did a nice little quirky smile, so I thought that was kind of fun. Anyway, this week we're focusing on botanicals, the makeup of gin, and it's so important for you to know a little bit about botanicals, but the more you know, the better, if you're going to really appreciate gin and build up your collection. So, it's quite expensive to buy a bottle of gin, and if you get to know ones that you really like and ones not too sure, whether you like lots of juniper in there, or spices, or floral, this is actually the way to do it. And obviously, you can research now. It's so easy with Google, and go on there. You see a new bottle and you want to try, just go on their website and have a look, because it's not like the old days. They're not as guarded as they used to be with their secret recipes, but they're not going to tell you everything. They may tell you all the botanicals, but they're certainly not going to tell you the ratios. I find that very hard with my distillery that I represent. The master distiller likes to keep a few secrets, and I don't blame him. If I had to make a guess, and look at a basic gin, I might say there's probably 40% juniper, 10% angelica root, 2% orris or licorice root, that sort of thing, which of course doesn't add up to 100%. So it could be that if you took a gin, for instance, like the Botanist from Islay, Scotland, beautiful part of the world, I think that they've got 40 plus botanicals. So if you take my sort of guess of the main botanicals, and then all of the other ones are going to be 1% or less, trust me, because that's the makeup of a gin. So why is it so important? Well, there's a really, really cool thing about gin that makes it stand apart from any other alcoholic beverage. And sorry to all you wine sommeliers out there, but this is actually true. It's an actual fact that when you nose a gin, you'll detect the aromas that come off the still at distillation in the correct order. So you can actually train your nose to smell gin and taste gin, because obviously your nose and your palate are one. And you can, it's far more authentic. So for example, if you were to detect strawberries on a Pinot Noir, or grapefruit on an IPA ale, oranges on a Highland Park single malt whiskey, there's no fruits or spices in the making of these products. It's a chemical reaction during distillation, brewing, or it's been obviously maturing in an oak cask for many years. So yeah, I think that's why it's so important to know your botanicals. And if we take the Fab Four botanicals, which I just mentioned, and really is the makeup of Tanqueray, for example. Tanqueray hasn't, if I'm not mistaken, Tanqueray and Beefeater haven't changed their recipe in a couple of 100 years. It's juniper, angelica root, coriander, and either licorice root or orris root. And that's the basic makeup of gin. As I said, until you get to so many craft distilleries today use an abundance of botanicals, anywhere from 18, 20 to 40 plus. And they're all great. And eventually, I think, hopefully listening to this podcast, you'll be able to detect an awful lot of them, to be honest. So let's have a look at those four, for example. So juniper, which is, you can't really call yourself a gin without lots of juniper. And you might think that most countries can provide enough juniper berries for distilleries. And in fact, they can't at all. Juniper trees, or bushes, have been on decline in the UK for many, many years. It's most countries never actually they didn't certainly know about this new gin boom explosion. And they never really harvest junipers. They never made farms or anything like that, but they certainly do in Italy. And in fact, Italy, some farms in Italy actually do your orris root as well, which is great. But for craft distilleries in most countries, yes, there's certainly enough junipers around, and each one has foragers, and the foragers know where to go and find junipers that the master distiller has specifically asked for. So if it's in Nova Scotia, where I am, it could be if we went to the valley region, the lush valley region, it would be a different juniper than on the actual coast, where you would get the elements of the sea, lots of salt spray, for example. So yeah, you can do that. Now, in the case of the big names that we know, that produce, millions of gallons of gin per year, they obviously can't do that. Can't possibly run out of junipers. And they have long-term contracts with farms in Italy. And if you look at them, it actually reminds me of hops in Kent and places like that in England for the breweries. So, yeah, they take it very serious. They have the large harvests every year. And with the long contract that they have with the distilleries, they guarantee the amount of volume demand that's required. And if you go on, you can probably find it on YouTube or something. It's actually quite neat how they shake the bushes or give them a little bash on the trunk. I'm not sure, but they don't damage the berries. The berries will eventually just fall off for them. Yeah, so juniper is very, very important. And further down the line, we can go into different juniper, different terroirs, because not all junipers are going to taste the same on a gin. But yes, piney comes to mind, and some people love that. And the new gin consumer, maybe not so much. And I think it's next week we're going to do contemporary versus classic gins. So more about that. So the second thing that you need is coriander seeds, and they can be found in Morocco, India, even Russia. It's easily the second most important botanical in the makeup of gin. I know that, for instance, here in Nova Scotia, I know at least Compass Distillery anyway is using cilantro instead of coriander, same family. So that gives you another local one if that's what a distillery is trying to do, is make sure that it's 70-80% locally produced, locally grown and produced, which is a good thing. But in most cases, yeah, that's where you get your coriander seeds from. Angelica root. Oh, by the way, the coriander seed would give you a lemony, kind of spicy. on the nose and taste. Angelica root, which is very earthy and herbal, is basically, along with the orris root, binds all the botanicals together. So by staying together longer means that when it's in your glass, you can nose it for far much longer than normal if you didn't have a big presence of those roots. And as I said, orris root from Italy, sometimes from the same farm as the junipers. Morocco, India, would have a smell of violets. It's wonderful, actually. It's a really, really, really nice smell. I remember when I was first doing single malt whiskey, I thought, I'm never, ever going to be able to get flowers. I find flowers quite difficult. But as humans, we don't tend to take in smells as much as, say, some animals, for example. We don't go and get our fruit and veg and smell them before we cook them or eat them. I'm not sure we're quite totally aware of what smells we're getting from our garden. But I did over time be able to distinguish rose quite well, both in single malt and Hendrick's gin. But violet, it's different, and you will get it for sure. So anyway, that's the look out for them. So we're looking at citrusy, earthy, herbal. Juniper would be piney, probably. And then a little bit of violet if they're using orris. Sometimes they use licorice as well. So you'd have to work that one out. And I think that is probably the main things you need to know. So a bit like episode 1, where I went off and did a little story. I won't be doing that every week. But I have, fortunately, been able to experience quite a few things back in my original homeland. Because I try to go back as much as possible, and have been until COVID. But I had the chance to go to the Gin Institute on Portobello Road. And if you go on their website, the Gin Institute, London, you can book for 2 of you, or you can book a group. But it's a fantastic experience that really will help you, as I'm trying to do, with being able to nose and taste and know the makeup of gins that you would prefer to buy. I mean, let's face it, you're in Canada, a really nice premium gin, bottle of gin, it's going to cost you $50. So over time, when you're doing your collection over time, it'd be nice to know up front whether or not you're really, really, really going to enjoy it. So this is, it's a long one. I mean, it takes a few hours to do this because they start with, you're in a beautiful in a pub, and they go through all the cocktails and the history, and they give you, I think 3 or 4 cocktails. So you already have a buzz before you even get to the most important part, which is learning how to make your own gin. And they have then, have 24, distillate botanicals. So what they've actually done is they've distilled each botanical separately, and you get a tiny wee glass, and you have to nose and taste it, make your notes, and then they want you to pick your favorite 8 or 10 that you feel would make a wonderful gin and a nice aroma and taste profile. And it was absolutely amazing. It's good. I don't think anybody was driving in London after that because, my gosh, there's a lot to drink. Had a nice buzz on the tube going back to my hotel. But when I chose mine, the master blender came and had a look at the notes. And he said, I bet you liked Turkish Delight when you were a kid. And I was like, it was my favorite chocky bar, Turkish Delight. Absolutely loved it. For Canadians, that would be Turks. I'm not sure what it'd be in the US. Maybe Turks. But anyway, Turkish Delight. And I said, how did you work that one out? And he said, well, you chose julep berries, which is in Bombay Star, I think. Julep berries and cardamom. And he said, those two together make Turkish Delight. Tastes just like it. I was like, wow, that's incredible. And that's the magic of a master distiller, master blender, knowing these things. And it's something that you can certainly develop over time. So hopefully that's going to get us all started. There's a lot coming up. I've got to definitely cover classic gins versus contemporary gins. I'd mentioned at the beginning aviation, and that's one that stands out as being very contemporary. Most of these gins have a majority of junipers, but if you are to add certain botanicals to your gin that are very powerful, they can easily mask out juniper. And a lot of them now do, and they're under contemporary, and it's basically for the new gin drinker. The consumers that were just a tad put off by that big juniper gin with lots of piney nose and taste, etc. But we will cover how also you've got to remember if you're adding a tonic or a cocktail, garnishes, they also come into factor in where you can actually probably stay with a classic gin and just do all your mixing and your garnishes correctly. So, episode 3 will start in December, and obviously we're getting towards Christmas. So I think we're going to change up a little bit on what I'd originally thought to do, to have it in what I feel would be the correct order, just because with Christmas coming up, I actually have an early Christmas present from Santa. I have an Advent gin calendar with 24 unusual gins. So I figure that if I do my maths, that's just over 7 in 3 weeks if I was to do this leading up to Christmas Day. So I think what we'll do is I'll do a bit of a sort of a live nose and taste each week on 7, and then before Christmas, so you don't have to, have a problem with the Christmas rush, what I'm going to do is suggest what you should look for to put in your Christmas shopping. So that can be gins, and it can also be all sorts. So it could be a single malt whiskey. Certainly need to tell you what ingredients to get for some of the wonderful cocktails, gin cocktails. And at the same time, make sure that it's not going to break the bank and, stay within a nice budget. So until next time, thanks so much for tuning in. Cheers. Bye.